A buddy of mine told me this story the last time we went camping. Creeped me out for the night, so I thought it was worth submitting here. There's a sleepaway camp program for young kids in northern Arizona. The camp itself is your typical facility with some cabins for campers to stay, a lake, obstacle courses, sports fields, a dining hall, etc. Most of the camp counselors are former campers, usually around their early 20s. One such counselor, Alex, had been a staff member there for a few years, and so he was given more responsibilities than most counselors. Generally, the camp owner gets to the facility a day before the first of the staff to set up an orientation/welcome meeting in the main dining hall. The last couple of years, he'd brought Alex to help him set it up. This year, however, he told Alex that he was going to be a day late due to family issues, and he needed Alex to go on and set it up alone. Of course, Alex gladly agreed, and on the drive up, only for a brief moment did he really think about the idea of being at camp all alone for a whole night. But he laughed it off. I've been coming here for years, nothing to be afraid of. So, he made the journey to the camp, undaunted. He got there in the late afternoon, and went right to work setting up the dining hall. It only took him a few hours, and when he was done, he used the last bit of daylight to take a walk around the camp for old time's sake. It grew dark, so he decided to call it a night. As he was heading back to his usual cabin, he thought he saw something out of the corner of his eye in the woods beyond the facility. He looked closer, and just as he thought, there was nothing there. He laughed it off again, knowing that he was way too old to be scared of the things in the woods here anymore. Then, he got into his cabin and prepared for bunk that night. He finished unpacking his things, and that's when he saw it out the window. Down the path, leading to his cabin about 100 feet, some sort of figure motionless. He couldn't make out what it was in the darkness. He peered harder at it and convinced himself it was just the base of a tree. He laughed again, a little bit more nervously, and looked away. Moments later, he looked back, and this time the figure was closer. But he didn't see it move an inch. It was motionless. Now he could see it clearer. It wasn't a tree. It was too square to be a tree. It looked like some sort of box, maybe 6 feet tall or so. Mystified as to what this box could be, he wasn't paying attention and tripped over his suitcase. When he got back up and looked out, the box was gone. Just then he was startled by a knock on his door. It only took about 2 more seconds for him to feel relieved, however. Okay, someone's been playing a prank on me, he said to himself. He walked towards the door, uttering out loud, Okay, you got me, nice one. Convinced me I have to set up the orientation by myself. What a perfect time to pull a prank. He opened the door, but no one was there. Then he stood there frozen. There it was, no more than 20 feet away, the box. Except now, Alex could see this was no ordinary box. It was a coffin. He slammed the door shut and hid behind the wall. Then he heard a pounding on the door. He opened it again, and was looking right into the coffin, standing straight up. Almost instantly, Alex slammed the door, and ran to the other side of the cabin towards the back door. He opened it and ran out, and kept on running. He looked back, and now the coffin was on the other side of the cabin. He kept running. He looked back. The coffin was behind him, maybe 50 feet. Every time he looked over his shoulder, the coffin was motionless, but somehow it kept following him. He ran and ran until he got to the main building. He ran outside and locked the door behind him. He ran upstairs, and he heard a banging on the front door. He heard it slam open. Alex had no idea what to do, so he hid in the infirmary. Then he heard a thud. Then another. Then another. He knew it, but he didn't believe it. The coffin was coming upstairs after him. He hid in the nurse's supply closet. The thuds continued, until he heard them right outside the infirmary door. Then they stopped. He hid there, frozen in terror, for what seemed like an eternity, but was probably closer to about 10 minutes. Finally, he worked up the courage to peer out of the closet door, and he saw nothing. So he got out of the closet. He was walking towards the door when it suddenly flew open. There was the coffin, staring him straight in the face. He jumped back. He grabbed a chair and threw it at the coffin. It didn't budge. He started grabbing anything near him and throwing them at the coffin. Trash cans, some medical supplies, anything he could grab he threw at the coffin in desperation. Finally, he opened the medicine cabinet and started throwing its contents at the coffin. Nothing he threw made a difference. Still, there was one bottle left, so he threw as hard as he could at the coffin, and finally it was gone. The coffin vanished. Alex was stunned. He had no idea what he did. Finally, he walked over to see what the last bottle was. He picked it up and read, Robitussin. It stops the coffin. Number 2. Background. I worked summers as a camp counselor in the northern parts of Ontario, Canada. On the day this particular incident occurred, I was camping with a group of 10-year-old boys on the same lake the summer camp was based on. So, like a routine camping trip, we canoed out to the site and set up our tents. Me and my co-counselor Mike take turns supervising the kids while they swim, build forts, play games, etc. We cook some food over the fire, sit around and tell stories, cook s'mores, the typical Canadian camping experience. At around 9ish, I tell the kids it's time for bed, and they head into their tents, which were positioned a small walk away from the shoreline, but still in line of sight from where we had the fire pit. So, me and Mike are basically just hanging out before we decide to head into our tent and call it a night. What happened next still troubles me to this day. It remains my go-to scary campfire story. We were both gazing into the pitch-black night water, and we saw a small light approaching us slowly and slightly above the water level. We speculated what it could possibly be for a few minutes before it came close enough for us to realize that it was mounted on top of the front of a kayak, and that somebody was approaching our campsite. Now, it is important to know that as a camp counselor, part of our training goes over how to deal with stranger encounters, an environment where we are responsible for a group of children on public property. I was prepared to give the mystery paddler the typical speech about how we're camping with a group from a recognized organization and how we would respectively ask them to find another campsite. However, this person's appearance shook me to the bone as the light drew nearer. Paddling this kayak was a woman who looked to be in her 60s. She had incredibly long wisps of gray hair that were trailing in the water. Her skin looked like old leather, and her dead-looking eyes were tough to spot under all of her wrinkles. She looked directly at me, and when she spoke, I realized that she was missing most of her teeth.
Are your children safe in bed?
She asked me, pointing in the direction of the tents, not really knowing how to respond, and quite frankly, pooping my pants. I responded by telling her that they were fine and she had to leave.
That's good, just as expected for this time,
she said with a smile, then turned her kayak and paddled off into the night. At this point in time, myself and Mike were legitimately creeped out, and not only by the appearance of this mystery woman who resembled a freaking corpse, but also her inquiry about the whereabouts and safety of the kids. We had brought on this trip. Not knowing what else to do, we grabbed our hunting knives and sat by the fire after checking on the kids. Half an hour later is where crap started to get really creepy. Across the lake, a female counselor was leading another trip for kids the same age group. She sent me a text which read something along the lines of, "Hey Sean, stop screwing with us. This isn't funny. My kids are really creeped out." I instantly called her and let her know that I had just seen someone near my campsite that seemed eerie, and that I was not trying to play a joke. Apparently, one of her kids had opened the tent door to take a pee, and had seen a woman with long hair standing with her arms open towards them near the shoreline. Number 3. So, a while ago when I was a teenager, 14 years old, I went on one of those camping trips that various companies offer during the summer. It was me, 9 other kids, and 2 counselors, who were only 5 or 6 years older than us kids. It was in the Pacific Northwest of the USA, Washington if I remember correctly. So anyway, every day we would hike, and then after the hike was over, we would hop back into our van, with the U-Haul attached on the back, and head to a campground. We usually stayed in campgrounds that were pretty heavily populated, KOAs and the like. But this one night, we went to a campground where we were one of 2 groups of people. The other occupants were a young married couple. To start off with, and what really caught me by surprise, was that the campground was in the middle of the thickest forest I've ever been in. I legitimately could not see 50 feet ahead of me when we were walking around during the daytime. At night, it was obviously much worse. Fast forward to dinner time that night. As we're munching on our food, one girl says that she has to go to the bathroom. Since it's nighttime and there are nighttime animals walking around everywhere doing their thing, we have to go in groups to the bathroom. I volunteer to go, as does another guy. The bathroom is approximately 200 yards away from our campsite, so it's a bit of a walk. The sun is near done setting as we arrive at the bathroom. The girl goes in and does her business. As the other guy and I are waiting for her, we decide that it's probably smarter to go to the bathroom now rather than going in the middle of the night. So we're in there, and I, just having finished going to the bathroom, am washing my hands. The other camper is in the stall. There's 2 sinks, and all of a sudden, the one I'm not using turns on. I think this is weird, but it turns off after a couple of seconds. Whatever, I think. Weird things happen like that all the time, no biggie. So the other guy finishes up, and we go out and continue to wait for the girl. It took her like 15 or 20 minutes. She must have been constipated or something. Finally, she comes out, and as we're about to walk back, it's pretty dark now. She says, "There was a woman in the bathroom with me." We respond with, "So what? It was probably just that other woman in the other campground." "No," she says. "The woman in the bathroom is middle-aged. The other camper's like 20. "Probably just another camper we didn't know about," says the other guy. "It can't be," I say. "This campground is tiny. We're definitely the only 2 groups here." "Whatever," I say quickly dismissing the notion as to not freak myself out. "We should get back. We've been gone a long time." They agree, and we keep going. At the back of my mind, though, I'm getting kind of scared. Some weird things are going on. As we keep walking, it gets very dark. I'm not saying it's a weird dark, just that, because there are no cities near us, there's no glow to light up the night sky, so naturally it's pitch black, which is scary by itself, I would say. The girl turns around and notices a light behind us. It appears to be a flashlight. Whatever, it's probably just the other campers. By this time, we're at the other camper's site, and lo and behold, both of them. We look back, and the flashlight is out. It just disappeared. But there are definitely footsteps. I mouth the words, "Do you hear footsteps too?" They both nod. We give each other another quick glance and start sprinting back to the campsite. It's a short sprint, and we soon arrive there, ready to tell our story. I guess we trusted that we had outrun the footsteps or something, because I, for one, felt completely safe back at the campground. For all the people who are reading this and saying, "This is crap, not paranormal or scary at all," well, here's the part where it gets scary. We slept in 4 tents. There are 4 girls and 5 guys, so 2 guys' tents and 1 girl's tent, as well as a counselor's tent. They were all relatively near each other, within 10 meters, I'd say. So we're all trying to fall asleep. The previous flashlight encounter completely slipped my mind now. We're talking as kids do, when suddenly, footsteps. The same speed as the ones we heard before. My teammates start making noise, like, "What was that?" etc. But I shush them. We remain very silent, just listening. After a while, they go away. It was weird. It seemed like they were just walking in place. They never got farther away from the tents. Whatever was following us left, right? Wrong. As we begin to ease back into sleep and start to doze off, I hear the worst, most horrifying cackle/laugh that you can imagine. Think the opening of Feel Good Inc. by the Gorillaz, just 10 times scarier. I whisper to my tent mates, asking them if they can hear it. They nod. Then, no joke, I hear the sound of a faucet running. It all comes back rushing to me. The sink magically turning on, the footsteps. We sit there in silence for what felt like an hour. Probably was only like 5 minutes, but, until a girl's voice tentatively asked, "Did you guys hear that?" I say, "Yes." Everybody's whispering to each other now. "What was that? I'm so scared right now," etc. Even the counselors joined in. Then, out of nowhere, the loudest siren in the planet goes off. I'm sure you've heard one of those bomb raid sirens that they have in cities before. This was very similar. A siren in the middle of nowhere, Washington? This can't be happening. It goes on for roughly a minute or 2, and then it cuts off. After that, one of the counselors quickly says, "Let's get in the van, guys." I don't know how on earth I summoned up the courage to walk the 10 meters to the van, but I did. As soon as we got in, everybody's freaking out. Not screaming, just a stunned silence. We all confirmed that we heard all the noises. The faucet, the footsteps, the siren, and the cackle. And then the 3 of us who went to the bathroom bring up our previous encounter. By now we're like, well, I guess this is it, we're done, nice knowing you. We turn off the lights of the van, And as we do, we noticed that the couple who was camping next to us had the good sense to leave. Now, as you might suspect, this made us feel a lot worse, given that now we are officially the only people here. And then, out of nowhere, someone says, "Wait, is that a person?" I look out the window and sure enough, there's a figure walking the road. "Everyone be as quiet as you possibly can," we say, because this person, or whatever it is, definitely won't see a van full of kids right next to the road. The funny thing is though, only like half of us can see it. One counselor and about 5 of the 9 of us. The others say, "Yeah right, stop playing jokes you guys," but we insist. There's a thing walking the road coming towards us. As it gets near, I make out the figure of a woman, who looks to be about 40 years old or so. The girl who had to go to the bathroom has seen her before. I nearly faint, and I'm so scared. I probably peed my pants. Then, suddenly she vanishes. What happened? Where'd she go? Still, half of us never even saw a thing and didn't believe us. Nothing else happened that night, and we all gradually fell asleep. The next morning, I wake up thinking it was just a nightmare, but I'm in the van. We all confirmed this all actually happened. We all realized that it definitely did happen, and we need to leave right now as quickly as possible. We didn't even eat breakfast. To this day, I have no idea what any of that was. The siren, the woman, the faucet, nothing. Hearing my roommates walk around their house as I'm trying to fall asleep at night still scares me. Number 4. I'm female, using a throwaway account and posting this here because I don't care if anyone believes me or not. It's a story, my story, and it's nice to finally sit down and tell someone about it, even if you are just some random stranger on the internet. Growing up, my home life wasn't ideal. I won't go into some sob story, but it was bad enough to warrant involvement from authorities on multiple occasions. You would think that I would have been taken away from my mom, but our judicial system is pretty messed up. My mom and whatever boyfriend she had at the time were always careful to not let my outward well-being stray too close to concerning. Some part of me thinks that she only wanted me and my brother because of government assistance. One winter, when I was about 6, our gas was shut off due to bills not being paid. My mom's solution was to add a single blanket to my bed and dress me in long sleeves and sweatpants. I complained that my nose and ears were too cold, but she told me to sleep with the covers over my face. It's difficult to remember all the details because I blocked out most of my childhood and adolescence, but I remember a pretty bad snowstorm coming in one night. The house was already freezing, so I begged my mom to let me stay with my older brother, but she declined. That night was so cold that I was kept awake by my constant shivering. When my mom got me up that morning, school still hadn't been canceled, but I think my complaining made her worry that I would end up saying something to a teacher, so I was kept home. As a kid, I was overjoyed by the idea of a snow day. Where we lived, snow was pretty common, so it usually took a blizzard to get school shut down. I always saw snow days on TV though, and was enthralled by them. I was an odd kid, and almost felt like my first year of school wouldn't be complete without at least one snow day. My brother still had to go to school, which made me worry that my dreams of playing outside would be short-lived. Luckily for me, my mom could only stand having me around for short periods of time, so she bundled me up and practically hurled me into the snow. I didn't care though, as I was a bit of a wild child, usually pretty hyperactive and very independent, probably because of neglect. Behind our house was an area of thick woods. If you followed the path through it, you would reach another housing area, much nicer than our own. If you happened to go off the path, straying diagonally, you would end up on a forest reserve. For this reason, my mother never let me anywhere near the woods. As I was playing in the snow, I suddenly recalled that an older boy lived in the house almost directly across from mine. I knew this because earlier that year, I had gone against my mother's wishes, went through the woods, and ended up in his backyard. He had a swing set, interesting action figures, and snacks. I don't know what compelled me, but I suddenly had the desire to go see if he was home. Like I said, I was 6 at the time, and my thoughts weren't always coherent. This is where my already foggy memory becomes even hazier. I find myself trying to recall everything, but it all comes jumbled, like it was more of a quick dream. I found the path, took one look at my house to draw a mental line across the woods, and then I was alone. The snow started to fall again, and the heat I had maintained while playing had started to fade away. I should have been more worried, but ignorance is bliss when you're a child. I don't know if it was because the trees were blocking out the light, but I remember that the light dimmed around me and I heard someone calling my name. At first, I called back my own name, feeling like it was some sort of game. The voice got closer to me, and this sounds weird, but I wanted to play hide and seek with whoever it was. My mom had never had this stranger danger talk with me, so I assumed that if they knew my name, then they must be friendly. I don't think I even hesitated before I took off in the opposite direction of the voice. Off the path. I don't remember where I hid, but I do remember that it was dark, but I could still see out into the woods. It may have been a small cave or hollow, or a very dense tree with its branched way down to the ground. The voice changed. It still called my name, but it didn't sound human anymore. A fact that didn't bother me in the slightest. I knew I had picked a really good hiding spot, in that I was almost excited at the idea of being found by whoever it was. Soon, it stopped calling my name, and instead started making ooh-up sounds. I remember the sound. It's kind of like an elk/bird combo. I could hear it getting closer and closer, and as it did, my excitement grew. Right when sounded like it was just a few yards away from me, it stopped. I waited and waited, but nothing ever came. I felt disappointment rush through my little body, but just as I felt completely drained, a loud ooh-up came from directly behind me. I'm not sure if I looked behind me, but I do remember running out of my hiding place laughing and giggling. I ran through the snow and trees again and found a new hiding place. In the distance, I heard the sound coming from my old hiding place and knew that it was coming. I'm not sure how long this went on, but it was dark by the time I heard my brother calling and saw his flashlight bobbing towards me. For a long time, I believed that I'd still been in a state of play when he found me, but years later I asked, and he said very surprised that he even remembered, that I'd been curled up next to a log, half frozen. I didn't say anything to him, and I creeped him out quite a bit, because I kept making weird noises the whole way home and throughout that night. Even my mom spanking me and berating me, my only response was an "oh-ah-up." Most of my memory goes blank after that night, but according to my brother, I became a holy terror. I started throwing fits if my mom ever did something I didn't like, and I was known for saying or doing some pretty disturbing things. For example, when I was about 8, my new stepdad was passed out on the couch, and I told my brother in detail how easy it would be to skin him alive. Things got worse and worse till my strange behavior could no longer be tolerated at school. Teachers had, I guess, always been suspicious of my mother, but they never had much to go on. Social workers, even before that night, had been called to my home to check out things because it had always been cleanish and we had always had food. They didn't have anything to go on. That all changed when I was sent to see a therapist of some kind. I really don't remember. At first I wouldn't talk to him, but then they brought in my brother and I unloaded. It's not something I can get my brother to talk about readily, but he said that I didn't seem like myself, though everything I said changed our lives forever. No sob story or too personal details, but my mom was not a good woman. She was far worse than anyone could have suspected. I don't know how, but the biological father of my brother was tracked down. He was only 17 when my mom got pregnant, and he'd been around for a few months after my brother's birth, but she'd started dating another guy, left him, and took my brother. Being 17 and admittedly stupid, he just let her walk off with his son. She never even asked for child support. He had already been married and divorced by the time Child Services found him, and I think that may have been why he agreed to not only take in my brother, but me as well. The divorce had left him feeling like his life was hollow and meaningless. He often says that we gave him meaning. As kind as he is, I never really bonded with him, not like my brother did. He's always given me all the love I could ever want, but I have trouble accepting it. Childhood trauma and neglect has left me rather cold towards that kind of stuff. We had to move to another state to live with him, which really agitated me as a kid. That, coupled with constant therapy, often left me feeling isolated. All through my teen years, I admit that I was a bit sullen and purposely difficult, which I feel terrible for now. My only thoughts were to get away from my ultra-loving home and back to the home that had caused me so much mental scarring. Just the house, mind you. I didn't want to return to my mother. The need was so great that I made plans to move back to attend the college located a few towns over from my hometown. which is where I am now. Once I was away from my family, I was finally able to put into perspective how much love my adopted father had exhibited in taking us in. We were finally able to establish a much more meaningful, much deeper bond once he was at a distance. I thought about going back home. The college there is much better, but each time I thought about it, the image of those woods would flash into my mind. Last December, while on break, I decided to head down and take a look. For all I knew, the wooded area may have been filled up by housing, but it wasn't. I didn't even have to pull up my old house in Google Map. It felt like I was just led there. My old neighborhood had gone to crap. Well, it's crappier than it had been. The house I grew up in was completely boarded up, as were most of them on the street. I was actually very happy to see that, though. It meant that I could more easily access the yard. More specifically, the still unfenced backyard. As an adult, it was much more frightening to trudge through the snow up to the forest that was much darker than I remembered. It took a few long minutes of psyching myself up before I was able to step out onto the path that was still there. Once I was far enough in, the memory of playing hide and seek came flooding back with way more clarity than I had ever had. For the first time, I was putting into perspective the fact that I'd been playing with some unknown creature in some godforsaken dark creepy forest. I thought about noping out of there, but as I turned back I heard it. A whoop. Every hair in my body stood on end as I came close to peeing my pants. I could feel my cheeks beginning to heat up, and some sort of fearful blush, and my eyes began to water. I turned back around and hurriedly walked down the path. In the back of my mind, I haphazardly wondered if that boy still lived in that house, and the idea of seeing if he was home seemed like a very good plan. I didn't want to run, though. I felt like running would only cause whatever it was to chase me. That thought quickly went out the window, though, as I heard the sound directly behind me and felt a warm breath on the back of my neck. I didn't look back. I ran, occasionally slipping and sliding on the slick, thin layer of snow. The path must have changed, because I soon found myself at a dead end. There were a cluster of trees that I don't remember being there, and the path faded away between them. In a panic, I thought that maybe they had grown over the path, so I stripped around them. The tree nearest me rustled, and from somewhere inside it, something whispered my name. The voice was cracked, somewhat human, but it was more like what you would imagine an animal would sound like if it could talk. I didn't even care about following the path at that point. I took off in a direction that looked to have less trees, hoping it would be a way out. I was wrong. Instead, I found a dirt hill with a steep drop-off, and on the inside, most directly in front of me, was a little cave/hollow. I knew what it was immediately. My first hiding spot from the game of hide and seek. And there was something inside. I couldn't make out what it was, but I knew it had antlers and it was crouching very much like a human would. So much fear ran through me that it took my breath away, and I stood there for a moment in stunned silence. I vaguely thought about how this thing was going to kill me, and how it would probably be worse than any horror movie I'd ever seen. Then I heard it call my name. With the same voice I heard in the tree, it shocked me into action, and I ran alongside the hill until I found a way up that wasn't too steep. At a distance, somewhere behind me, I heard the call, and at that point, I finally started to cry. Somehow, don't ask how, I finally spotted a break in the trees and barreled out into the direct sunlight and the boy's backyard. That part didn't register at first. It didn't click until I was banging on the back sliding door and his mom showed up, looking more terrified than I. She stood there staring at me with wide eyes. I thought about how insane I was going to sound and how insane I must look. "What do you want?" she called out through the door. "Does that kid still live here?" I panted stupidly. I lived across the way. Wanted to see if he was here. Thought I heard wolves. I won't go into too much details because this is way too long, but she almost called the cops, decided against it, and allowed me to leave my number for him. As I was about to take my very long walk around the woods to my car, I guess she took pity on me and offered to drive me. I was lucky because, even driving, it took about 20 minutes to get around the long strip and back to my old neighborhood. During the ride, she remarked that she didn't remember me being one of her son's friends. I explained that I wasn't really his friend, just a random girl that had met him after trekking through the forest one summer. When I told her this, she turned a shade of whitish green and gave me a funny look. My son, she explained slowly, was convinced in his early teens that there was a ghost girl that lived in the forest with the creature, and would go on and on about how she would come and stand outside his window and talk to him at night. He said she was a girl he had previously met and had died in the forest. Wasn't sure how to respond to that. To my knowledge, I hadn't gone back into the forest after that first incident. Then again, I don't remember much of what happened after that night. So I was honest and explained that I had PTSD, with most of my memory being blacked out. This time she turned a new shade of pale and asked why I had PTSD. I explained, but it seemed like she already knew why, and I think it clicked who I was. I was in administrations in the high school here. We heard about you and what happened. The rest of the ride went very quietly. She dropped me off in my car, said her goodbyes, and left. For a long time as the sun was setting, I sat in my car and watched the edge of the forest. Had I really been going out there as a kid? A little girl with some creature? Why didn't I remember any of this? I can't explain the feeling that came over me, but it was calming. If all that was true, then whatever it was had never harmed me. The whole ride home, I was pretty zoned out, so I missed multiple text messages I received from an unknown number. Turned out to be that guy, who was very keen on the idea of seeing if I was the ghost girl from his teens. He went on to join the sheriff department, and on the side, wait for it, he does ghost hunting. We texted back and forth for a few days before I finally agreed to meet up with him. He almost passed out when he first saw me, but then he started to pick apart my story and appearance, saying that I was probably the same human girl he met, but certainly not his ghost girl. He maintained that attitude till the subject of the woods came up. This guy hunts ghosts. I definitely didn't feel like I would be the crazy one if I told him about the sounds and the creature. This changed his tune a little bit, but he still maintains that I'm not the same girl. We are now semi-dating. Semi because I'm not very fond of close emotional bonds. And no, he still won't believe me. Since December, I've started meditation in hopes of recalling lost memories, specifically about the forest. I've been able to recall a few, but they're choppy and hard to follow. I remember talking to something, playing house sometimes, or hide and seek, always at night. I've tried doing research, and the closest physical description I can think is a Wendigo. But the nature doesn't really line up, seeing as those things are supposed to be negative entities. Any ideas? I'm thinking about going back, and probably will. Hey guys, Basement Horrors here, and I hope you guys enjoyed these camping stories. I know the last one wasn't really a camping story, but it took place mostly in the woods, and I love those Wendigo stories. They're so freaky. So I decided to add it anyway. Plus, I really enjoyed it. Anyway, guys, if you did like the video, make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't, and comment down below what you want to see next. Also, if you have any personal stories of your own, or creepypastas, or original artwork, send them in to basementhorrors@gmail.com. And if you're not really into horror, but you like listening to life stories, head over to my second channel, Slightly Disturbed Studios. That link will be in the description as well. Till next time, have a horrific day.